They killed Big Bertha. That 8 PB base came to my dock every morning for 3 years. I named her, fed her, watched her grow. Now she's floating belly up with 200 other fish because my HOA president thinks she owns my lake. The chemical stench burned my nostrils at sunrise. Sharp copper sulfate mixed with rotting scales. Vivian Blackwater had dumped $3,500 of industrial algae side into my crystal clear our water overnight, turning it the color of antifreeze. I stood there holding Bertha's slimy, lifeless body, shaking with pure rage. Then I realized something absolutely beautiful. Vivian's fancy subdivision gets their drinking water from the same underground spring that feeds my lake. Every drop, every house, 847 homes. She didn't just poison my fish. She poisoned her entire neighborhood, and she has no clue what's about to hit her. Ever had neighbors who thought they could destroy your property just because they didn't like what you were doing? Tell me where you're watching from. And if you've got an HOA nightmare story, drop it below, because this one's about to get wild. My name's Marcus Reed, and at 52, I never thought I'd be at war with a woman who probably spends more on her manicures than I make in a week. But that's suburbia for you. I'm a retired electrician turned solar panel installer here in Pine Ridge, North Carolina. The kind of guy who fixes things with his hands and believes people should mind their own damn business. My 12-acre property, with its spring-fed lake, has my family since 1952, back when this whole area was tobacco fields and common sense. Every morning I walked that gravel path my grandfather laid boots, crunching on stones worn smooth by decades of fishermen. The dock planks feel warm and weathered under my hands, still sticky with morning dew. And that sweet honeysuckle smell mixes with the clean mineral scent of spring water. Blue heron nest in the cypress trees. Base jump at dawn. And for 70 years, this place has been pure peace. Then the developers showed up. 15 years. 15 years ago, they bought everything around me and built Willow Creek Estates. 847 McMansions, starting at $600,000 each. They offered me millions to sell Wanted My Lake for their country club. I told them they could take their money and build a clubhouse in hell. Most of the new neighbors were fine. Normal people who waved when they jogged past, maybe asked about the fishing. But then Vivian Blackwater moved in. Picture this. 47 years old, drives a white Lexus that's detailed more often than most people. Shower and carries a leather portfolio to neighborhood barbecues. She talks like a lawyer even when ordering coffee. Throws around phrases like property value optimization and aesthetic compliance standards. The kind of person who probably schedules her bathroom breaks. Vivian appointed herself HOA president within 6 months and immediately launched her enhancement campaigns, which is fancy talk for making everyone miserable until they bow to her suburban dictatorship. Her opening shot came 3 months after she moved in. Certified mail, official letterhead, the whole production. My unsightly fishing activities were apparently disturbing her peaceful enjoyment of the neighborhood. $800,000 she paid for that lakefront view, and watching me catch dinner was somehow ruining her investment. The legal threats escalated fast. She claimed my dock violated aesthetic covenants that were supposed to apply to all area properties. The woman actually had the nerve to demand I tear down a structure that's been here since before she was born. I called my buddy Tom Martinez, real estate lawyer, who saved my ass more than once. He nearly choked on his coffee laughing. Marcus, property that predates HOA establishment cannot be subject to retroactive covenants. She's threatening you with laws that don't exist. Knowledge nugget. If your property existed before an HOA was formed, their rules generally can't be applied to your land retroactively. Your deed date is your legal shield. When intimidation failed, Vivian filed a false complaint with the county about my illegal dock structure. Poor inspector drove out here, looked at my 1987 permits, and apologized for wasting his time. You could practically see him rolling his eyes. That's when she revealed her true nature. Every morning, I head down to fish 6 a.m. when the bass are feeding, and suddenly Vivian needed emergency landscaping. Leaf blowers, chainsaws, industrial mowers, all screaming at maximum volume right along her property line. The diesel fumes would drift across my lake, mixing with honeysuckle and turning my peaceful morning into something that smelled like a highway construction zone. Her crew got more overtime in 2 months than most people see all year, all despite one guy trying to fish in his own backyard. But I kept fishing. Some principles are worth defending, even against suburban tyrants with too much money and too little sense. I had no idea that Vivian was just getting warmed up, and I definitely didn't know she was crazy enough to commit environmental terrorism to get her way. You know what's worse than a Karen with a law degree? A Karen with a law degree who thinks property surveys are weapons of mass destruction. 2 weeks after the county inspector laughed at her illegal dock complaint, Vivian hired the most expensive surveyor in 3 counties to verify our property boundaries. Not because there was any question. My grandfather marked those lines with concrete posts. That'll probably outlast civilization itself. This was pure harassment with a professional invoice. The surveyor showed up Tuesday morning with equipment worth more than my truck. The lights, GPS units, laser levels that probably cost more per hour than most people make in a day. I watched from my kitchen window, sipping coffee and enjoying the show as they spent 6 hours measuring the exact same boundary that's been legally established since Truman was president. The smell of fresh-cut grass from their fancy equipment mixed with morning lake mist. Even their harassment had to be perfectly manicured. 3 days later, Vivian's lawyer sent me a registered letter claiming my dock extended exactly 6 in onto community water rights. 6 whole inches on a lake that's been in my family since before she was born. But here's where Vivian really showed her true colors. She filed an actual lawsuit in county court for property encroachment. Professional letterhead, court stamps, filing fees that probably cost more than most people's car payments. All over 6 in of dock space. When this woman commits to 6 minutes and 34 seconds to 7 minutes and 31 seconds ruining someone's life, she doesn't mess around. While her legal papers crawled through the system, she launched a Facebook campaign that would make a political operative jealous. Posted in the Willow Creek Estates group about her difficult neighbor who was refusing to respect community standards. The comment section turned into a digital lynch mob faster than you could say property values. But 2 can play the research game. I spent my weekend in the county courthouse basement breathing dust that 7 minutes and 3 seconds to 8 minutes and 12 seconds was probably older than Vivian's entire career, digging through deed records and property transfers. Sometimes the best revenge is just knowing more than your enemy. And holy hell did I hit the jackpot. My grandfather didn't just own the land. He owned exclusive water rights to the entire lake system. Every drop, every fish, every damn molecule of H2O. The original 1952 deed specifically included all water rights, surface and subsurface, including natural springs and tributaries there too. But here's the beautiful part that made me laugh. So hard I nearly fell off my chair. The lake is spring-fed from an underground aquifer that extends directly under Vivian's precious subdivision. Legally speaking, every time her neighbors flush their toilets, they're using my water. Knowledge nugget. Water rights often transfer separately from land ownership and are recorded in property deeds. These rights can be worth more than the land itself. I called Tom Martinez with my discovery, after he stopped cackling. Like a madman, he said, "Marcus, you don't just have a defense. You've got a nuclear weapon disguised as a property deed." So, we filed a countersuit for harassment, slander, and abusive legal process. But the timing, that was pure poetry. Vivian was hosting one of her fancy backyard dinner parties. 40-plus HOA residents standing around with wine glasses complaining about their property taxes while eating food that cost more per bite than most people spend on lunch. The evening air carried the scent 8 minutes and 35 seconds to 9 minutes and 33 seconds of expensive catered salmon and pretentious conversation. Champagne glasses caught the golden hour light. Everyone dressed like they were auditioning for a real estate commercial. Right in the middle of Vivian's speech about maintaining community standards and property values, our sheriff's deputy walked through her back gate like he owned the place. "Ma'am, I need to serve you with some legal documents." 40 conversations stopped mid-sentence. The only sound was ice clinking nervously in glasses as Vivian's perfectly manicured hands trembled reading the papers. Her foundation couldn't hide how pale she went when she realized what she was holding. "This is harassment," she shrieked loud enough to rattle windows. "That redneck is trying to intimidate me with frivolous lawsuits." And there it was. The mask slipped completely. The refined real estate attorney became just another suburban tyrant having a nuclear meltdown because someone dared fight back. Her dinner guests suddenly remembered 9 minutes and 32 seconds to 10 minutes and 40 seconds urgent appointments. Amazing how fast rich people can evacuate when someone starts screaming about rednecks at a catered party. But Vivian wasn't done. The next morning, I found an anonymous note under my windshield wiper. "Stop fishing or face the consequences." Apparently, public humiliation just made her more dangerous. Anonymous threats are cute, but what Vivian did next was straight-up government weaponization. There's nothing quite like watching a real estate attorney turn federal agencies into her personal attack dogs. Within a week of my countersuit, I had more government inspectors crawling over my property than a meth lab bust. Fish and Wildlife showed up first, clipboards in hand, claiming they needed to investigate potential disruption to migratory bird patterns caused by my fishing activities. I'm not making this up. This woman actually convinced a federal agency that me catching bass was somehow screwing with duck GPS systems. The EPA inspector arrived next, suited up like he was entering Chernobyl, armed with water testing kits and a clipboard thicker than Vivian's legal bills. Apparently, my private lake usage might be creating environmental hazards. The sweet irony of that accusation would hit me like a freight train later. County Health Department Thursday morning, Code Enforcement Friday afternoon. By week's end, I had more regulatory business cards than a Washington lobbyist. Each inspector found exactly what you'd expect from the cleanest lake in 3 counties. Absolutely nothing wrong. But bureaucratic harassment is a two-way street, and I was about to learn how to drive it. While Vivian was playing puppet master with government agencies, I was making friends with the puppets. Turns out, when you're polite to overworked civil servants, forced to investigate obviously complaints, they remember you. They also remember who's wasting their time. Dolores Martinez became my secret weapon. 68-year-old retired county clerk with a memory like a steel trap and a grudge against corrupt developers over coffee that tasted like justice and caffeine. She dropped a bombshell that made my head spin. Marcus, that whole subdivision was built on protected wetlands. Developer got his permits by promising to preserve all natural water features forever. It's federal law. The coffee cup felt warm in my hands as the implications sank in. Knowledge nugget. Development permits often contain perpetual preservation clauses that legally bind all future property owners. Violating these environmental restrictions can trigger massive federal penalties. I spent the next weekend playing environmental detective, and what I discovered was better than winning the lottery. Vivian's landscaping contractor, the same diesel-belching crew that had been serenating my fishing trips, was using my lake as their personal garbage dump. grass clippings, hedge trimmings, fertilizer-soaked debris, all of it flowing directly into federally protected wetlands. Every Saturday morning at dawn, like clockwork, I became an environmental paparazzi, hiding in the tree line with my camera, while the sweet smell of honeysuckle mixed with diesel exhaust. The rough bark of oak trees pressed against my back as I waited for the perfect shot. Third Saturday in a row, I caught them dumping organic waste straight into my water, the splash echoing across the still morning air. The photos were gorgeous, time-stamped, GP slow, high-resolution evidence of federal crimes happening in broad daylight. But the real jackpot came when I ran their license through the state database. Pristine Landscaping LLC was 40% owned by Richard Blackwater, Vivian's husband, real estate developer, and apparently part-time environmental criminal. The EPA doesn't just love environmental violations with photo evidence. They absolutely worship them when they're connected to harassment campaigns. I filed my complaint Monday morning with a smile that could have powered half the county. By Wednesday, Pristine Landscaping was under federal investigation. Richard lost 3 county contracts by Friday. Turns out, when you're dumping organic waste in protected wetlands, municipalities suddenly don't want you maintaining their public parks. Who could have seen that coming? The sound of Vivian's perfectly controlled world starting to crack was sweeter than church bells on Sunday morning. But if I thought environmental violations would humble her, I was about to learn just how spectacularly wrong one person can be. Nothing makes a desperate woman more dangerous than watching her husband's business empire crumble because of her personal vendetta. And Vivian Blackwater was about to prove she'd rather burn down the neighborhood than admit defeat. The morning I found the Algaecide Company's business card tucked under my windshield wiper, I knew we'd crossed a line from legal warfare into something much darker. The card smelled faintly of chlorine and desperation. Environmental terrorism was apparently Vivian's next play. Too bad she didn't realize she was about to poison her own drinking water. That business card under my windshield wasn't just a threat. It was a confession waiting to happen. But I had no idea Vivian was about to commit the kind of environmental crime that would make hardened EPA agents weep. While I was out of town visiting Sanders' sister in Charlotte, Vivian was busy researching algae management solutions. Like she was preparing for environmental warfare. She found Clearwater Solutions, a commercial algaecide company that specializes in industrial-strength pond treatments. The kind of chemicals that can sterilize a lake faster than you can say property values. Here's where Vivian's lawyer brain really shined. She called Clearwater and lied through her perfectly veneered teeth, claiming my lake was community property, experiencing a dangerous algae bloom that threatened public health. $3,500 in cash paid up front for a midnight chemical assault on what she told them was an emergency environmental situation. The irony would have been hilarious if it wasn't about to murder everything I loved. Came home Sunday evening to the smell hitting me before I even stepped out of my truck. That sharp metallic stench of copper sulfate mixed with mass death. The lake water had turned an unnatural blue-green color, like anti-reese mixed with apocalypse. Big Bertha was floating 20 feet from the dock, her massive body already bloated in the contaminated water. 3 years of morning feedings, watching her grow from decent-sized base into a lake legend, and now she was just another casualty in Vivian's suburban genocide. 200 other fish floated alongside her bluegill. Crappy catfish. An entire ecosystem assassinated overnight because one woman couldn't stand watching someone enjoy their own damn property. My hands shook as I fumbled for my phone. The smooth plastic slippery with sweat and pure rage. The county environmental emergency hotline connected me to Officer Jim Patterson, who'd been investigating illegal dumping for 15 years. When I described the aquatic crime scene, his voice shifted from routine bureaucrat to DEFCON 1. Don't touch anything. Keep pets away. And don't disturb the evidence. I'm bringing the hazmat team. Patterson arrived with water analysis equipment that looked like it belonged on Mars. The test strips turned colors that don't exist in nature, deep blues and purples screaming massive chemical contamination. The acrid smell of testing chemicals mixed with lake death made my eyes water. Industrial-strength copper sulfate poisoning, he said, his voice tight with professional fury. Whoever did this didn't just kill your fish. They sterilized the entire ecosystem for 2 to 3 years minimum. This is felony destruction of property, possibly federal environmental terrorism. Knowledge nugget. Illegal dumping of industrial chemicals on private property constitutes felony destruction in most states and triggers federal environmental crime charges carrying 5 to 10-year prison sentences. But Patterson wasn't done playing detective. While I stood there holding a garbage bag that used to be my fishing paradise, he was reviewing security footage from Mrs. Henderson's doorbell camera across the street. The video was crystal clear. Clearwater Solutions truck arriving at 2:17 a.m. 2 figures in protective suits dumping death directly into my lake, vanishing by 2:43 a.m. 26 minutes to destroy 70 years of family heritage. That evening, I sat on my dock holding one of the smaller dead bass, remembering my grandfather teaching me to cast in this exact spot. The wooden planks felt cold and splintered under my legs, and the silence was absolutely deafening. No birds, no insects, no life around water that used to bubble with activity. Sandra found me there an hour later, both of us crying as we started the nightmare cleanup of environmental terrorism. But grief sharpens focus like nothing else. As we filled garbage bag after garbage bag with Vivian's victims, my electrician brain started connecting dots. I'd installed solar panels on dozens of houses in this subdivision. I knew their utility systems intimately. Every house in Willow Creek Estates uses well water pumped from the same underground spring system that feeds my lake. The same aquifer, the same water source, the same copper sulfate contamination now flowing through limestone channels toward 847 unsuspecting homes. I had my water tested the next morning by an independent lab. The results made my blood run cold. Copper sulfate levels 4 times higher than EPA-safe drinking water standards. Vivian hadn't just poisoned my lake. She'd contaminated her entire neighborhood's water supply. Every faucet, every shower, every ice cube maker in that pristine subdivision was now serving up industrial toxins. The woman who spent months bitching about my unsightly fishing activities had just turned her perfect community into a toxic waste site, and she was about to drink her own poison. Sweet, sweet karma never tasted so metallic. You know that moment when you're researching one thing and accidentally discover nuclear codes hidden in your grandmother's recipe box? That's basically what happened when I decided to dig deeper into my grandfather's property records. I thought I was building a stronger legal defense against Vivian's lawsuit. What I found instead was the equivalent of owning the only water well in a desert full of thirsty people. Monday morning, I drove back to the county courthouse basement, that special kind of government purgatory that smells like old paper, dust mites, and crushed dreams. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry wasps while I dug through file boxes that hadn't been touched since people thought Y2K would end civilization. The original deed transfer from 1952 was buried under decades of irrelevant paperwork. My fingers were black with archival dust when I finally found it, written in that formal legal language designed to make normal humans fall asleep. Then I hit the paragraph that made my heart stop, including all water rights, surface and subsurface to underground spring system and tributaries thereto in perpetuity. In perpetuity, Latin for forever and ever. Suck it. My grandfather hadn't just bought land. He bought every drop of water flowing through the underground spring system extending for miles beneath what would eventually become Vivian's precious subdivision. I sat there in that dusty basement, hands trembling, holding a 70-year-old document that just made me the most powerful person in 3 counties. The paper felt thin and fragile, but the words on it were stronger than titanium. Here's where it gets absolutely delicious. I pulled the Willow Creek Estates development records from 2008. The developer water usage permit application claimed they'd be drilling independent wells with sustainable water sources. Independent wells that tap directly into my grandfather's spring system 400 feet downstream from my lake. Every single one of them. The developer never purchased water rights because he probably didn't even know they existed as a separate asset. Most people don't. They think owning land means owning whatever water's underneath it. Wrong. Expensive assumption. Career-ending mistake. Knowledge nugget. Water rights are completely separate from land ownership and must be explicitly transferred. Failure to secure these rights can expose developers and homeowners to massive legal liability and usage fees. For 15 years, 847 families had been using my water without permission, without compensation, and without even knowing their most hated neighbor literally owned every drop flowing from their taps. The math alone made my head spin. Average household water usage times 847 homes times 15 years times market rate for water rights. We're talking tens of millions of dollars in back payments I could legally demand. But the contamination angle, that was the diamond sitting on top of this legal gold mine. Every home in that subdivision was now drinking water poisoned by Vivian's midnight chemical warfare. Copper sulfate symptoms include stomach pain, nausea, liver damage, and in children, developmental problems. The EPA treats this as a public health emergency worthy of federal intervention. Vivian's lawsuit against me for 6 inches of dock space suddenly looked like a toddler threatening Mike Tyson. I called Tom Martinez from the parking lot, sunshine warming the truck's interior while my world tilted on its axis. Tom, I don't just own the lake. I own their entire water supply. Every drop they've used for 15 years is legally mine. The silence stretched so long I checked if my phone had died. Marcus, he finally whispered, you're not defending against a property dispute anymore. You're sitting on the biggest water rights case this state has ever seen. And if that contamination spreads through the aquifer. He didn't finish. We both knew Vivian had poisoned 847 homes using water that belonged to me. The power dynamic just shifted so hard I could feel the earth move under Vivian's designer heels. When you discover you're sitting on a legal nuclear weapon, you don't just start swinging it around like a drunk guy at a bar fight. You assemble a team of highly trained assassins who know exactly where to aim. First call went to Rebecca Torres, environmental lawyer out of Raleigh, who'd built her career destroying corporations that thought poisoning communities was just good business. Her office smelled like expensive espresso and vendetta when I walked in Tuesday morning. Water rights violation, environmental contamination, public health emergency, she said, eyes gleaming as she reviewed my documents. Marcus, this isn't a lawsuit. This is a masterclass in legal warfare that'll be taught in law schools for decades. Rebecca's strategy was beautiful. Hit them from every direction simultaneously before they even know they're under attack. Federal lawsuit for water rights theft. EPA emergency intervention for contamination. State criminal charges for illegal dumping. Civil suits for property damage, emotional distress, and punitive damages that would make a lottery winner blush. Legal tactic. Overwhelming opponents with simultaneous legal actions from multiple jurisdictions forces immediate defensive positions. They'll be too busy putting out fires to mount any coordinated counterattack. Second recruit was Dr. James Mitchell, hydrogeologist from North Carolina State, who makes opposing lawyers weep during depositions. We met at my poison lake Wednesday morning, where he spent 4 hours taking samples and mapping the underground spring system with equipment that probably cost more than my truck. Fascinating aquifer structure, he said, knee-deep in contaminated water that still reeked of chemicals. His hands moved precisely through testing procedures, while dragonflies that used to swarm here were notably absent. Single-source spring feeding directly into residential wells. Contamination will reach every home within 6 to 8 weeks. We're looking at 800 to 1,000 affected properties. The scientific hammer that would crush any doubt about Vivian's guilt. Third team member was Sarah Morgan, investigative journalist who'd spent 3 years taking down corrupt HOAs like she was collecting scalps. Her exposés had destroyed 2 HOA presidents for embezzlement and one who was literally running a protection racket. When she saw my evidence, she looked like a kid on Christmas morning. "This is Pulitzer-level material," she said, spreading documents across my kitchen table with reverent excitement. Power-drunk HOA tyrant poisons entire neighborhood while terrorizing the guy who legally owns their water supply. CNN will fight MSNBC for first interview rights.